Well, the holidays might be over, but I'm not ready just yet to give up my fancy desserts. Today is National Cream Puff Day, and we're going to do it justice and celebrate in style by making a croquembouche. And if you've never seen a croquembouche, well, just feast your eyes upon this glorious and impressive dessert. And if you've never heard of a croquembouche, well, that's just a fancy name for a cream puff tower. So if that sounds as good to you as it does to me, grab yourself a cup of coffee and join me in the kitchen. Okay, before we get started, let me just address a couple of things. Number one, I'm probably pronouncing this wrong. It's probably not croquembouche. So from here on out, we're just going to refer to it as the Tower of Cream Puffs. And number two, this recipe is not for the faint of heart, but it will give you a chance to impress your friends. I think it's absolutely beautiful, so I'm excited to share it with you guys today. And I'm going to break it down into 5 steps. We're going to make it just a little bit easier, I hope, by doing that. The first step is going to be we're going to make the cream or the custard. Number 2, we're going to make the cream puffs. Number 3, we're going to fill those puffs. Number 4, we're going to make a caramel that goes all the way around it. And number 5, we're actually going to build the tower. So the reason you want to do your cream first is because I believe like the authentic recipe for this actually calls for a custard, and that would take a couple of hours to set up in the fridge. So you can look up a recipe for custard. I'm not the biggest fan of it, so I'm actually going to be making a homemade whipped cream today. I simply adore whipped cream, and it's going to give me a chance to show you my Pampered Chef whipped cream maker. Now, don't worry if you don't have one of these. My website is listed in the description below. You can grab one there, and also the full recipe's in the description below. But you can also just use your hand mixer as well. I prefer to use this. I think it's not quite as messy for me. I like it. It has a lid. I can store the leftovers in here, and I can make just a little bit, or I can make a lot. And it's pink. So again, I love whipped cream, and it's so easy to make. One of the best things about making homemade whipped cream is you can flavor it however you like. So I'm just using a couple of tablespoons of powdered sugar. If you don't have powdered sugar, you can use a granulated. It might have a little bit of a gritty texture to it. But I like, if I'm going to make, say, an apple pie, I can make this cinnamon flavored. If I'm doing something that's chocolatey, I can add a little cocoa powder to this. So not only you can kind of make it your own, but it tastes so much better than what you're going to get in the store. And you know exactly what went in here too. So like I said, all you do, you fill it about halfway with your heavy whipping cream. A couple of tablespoons of sugar is all you need. And then we're just going to pump this. And it's going to take about 30 seconds to a minute. Okay, so you can start to feel it when it gets a little bit stiff. So we're just going to pull this out of here, and look at that. Oops, if I can get the bottom out. I might have made this too stiff. No, this is going to be great for filling our cream puffs. So all I'm going to do now is take my whipped cream. I'm going to grab myself a pastry bag, and I'm going to transfer this to a pastry bag, and then I'm going to put it in the fridge, and we can start working on our cream puffs. All right, so for the next step, we want to go ahead and make our cream puffs. So for that, I've got a saucepan that I'm going to add 2 sticks of butter to, which is a full cup. And then we're going to add 2 cups of water. And I got to tell you, I love these little Pampered Chef cups. They're made of silicone. They've got the measurements on here. They've got a little spout so you can pour. They've got a lid. You can store your leftovers. But what I love is they're microwavable. So if I've got something that I need to melt, maybe say chocolate or something like that, I can melt it. I have got the spout to pour. I've got the lid. I can save the leftovers. So I just love those. The other thing we're going to add to this is a ½ teaspoon of salt. So we're just going to melt this down, and we're going to bring it up to a boil. All right, so this looks like it's just about there. It's come up to a boil now. I'm going to go ahead and remove it from the heat. And then we're going to stir in 2 cups of flour. Just until it forms into a ball. So it's getting there. You'll know because it's going to start to pull away from the sides of the pan. And at this point, we're going to put it back on here, and we're going to cook this for just about 30 seconds longer. We just want to try to get some of this moisture out of here. All right, that looks about good. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn my burner off and move this out of the way. And then I'm going to transfer this into a bigger bowl, just so I've got a little more room to work. And now we're going to add in an egg, one at a time. And if you have a stand mixer with a paddle attachment, you can do that as well. I was being lazy today. I've got it in the corner over there, but I've got stuff in front of it. So I've got a total of 8 eggs here. Tell you what, about this point, I'm about wishing I got the paddle mixer or the stand mixer with the paddle out. My arm's already getting tired. It's about the only exercise I get during the day. And at points, it's going to look like it almost doesn't want to come back together again, but just keep stirring. It'll come back together. So I'm going to continue to add these eggs one at a time. Now that I've got my last egg incorporated, I'm going to go ahead and transfer this to a pastry bag, and then we can go ahead and put them on our sheet and get them baking. Okay, I've got my pastry dough transferred to my pastry bag. I've got my cookie sheet here with some parchment paper on it, and I've got the oven preheating to 450 degrees. But the first thing I want to do before I start piping these out onto here is just put a little, hopefully this works. This usually works. We're going to put just a little bit of this dough right in the corners. And this is going to help hold down our parchment paper. I'm going to put this back on here and press down. That way when I'm piping these on here, my parchment paper is not going all willy-nilly everywhere. All right, so we're going to pipe these in little circles, and we want them to be about, oh, maybe an inch big or so. Oh, no, I'm not good with measurements. All right. And you want to put them at least an inch apart. So just like that. Let go. Let go. There we go. We'll take care of those peaks here in just a second. I'm going to finish putting these on here. And there's going to be about 12 on here. This recipe should make about 24 of these all together. Okay, now that I've got all my cream puffs piped onto here, you can probably see they're not all about the same size, but that's okay. When we go to build our tower, I'll just take the bigger ones and we'll put them and make them part of the base, and we'll just use them, the smaller ones towards the top. The one thing I do want to do so that it has the cream puff shape is we're just going to dip our finger in water and we're going to push down these little tops here. So we don't have that little point or peak at the top. So these are going to go in the oven at 450 degrees, and we're going to leave them in there for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to turn it down to 325, and we're going to bake them for another 20 minutes. One more to go here. All right, I think that looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these in the oven, and I'll see you in just a second. So as you can see, I've got all my cream puffs done. They've been cooling for a little bit. One thing I think I forgot to mention is whenever they're baking in the oven, you want to make sure that you don't open the oven door, or you run the risk of them either not rising or them falling in. So make sure you don't open the oven door. But anyway, these have been cooling for just a little bit here. And the next thing you want to do is grab like a little wooden skewer, and you're going to flip your cream puff over, and you're just going to poke a tiny hole in the bottom. And then we're going to take our whipped cream that we put in our pastry bag, and you're going to want to use a pretty small tip. And I don't think I made my hole big enough. Let's try this again. Might have to work it around just a little bit. There we go. And as you start to fill it, you'll feel the weight of the cream puff get heavier. So you'll know when it's completely full. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish filling all these. And then once I've got all these filled, we go ahead and make the caramel and assemble our tower. Okay, so once you've gotten all your cream puffs filled, you can go ahead and set those aside. We're going to work on our caramel now. So I've just got a saucepan here that I've put 3 cups of water in. And to that, I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of light corn syrup. And 1 cup of water. So we're just going to stir this together. And then once we get this stirred together, we're going to bring this up to a boil. And we're going to put the lid on it. I should say we're going to put the lid on it, then we're going to bring it up to a boil. All right, so we put the lid on it, we're going to bring it up to a boil, and then we don't want to stir it anymore. We'll uncover it once it comes up to a boil, and then we'll let it turn a dark amber color. So right now we're just going to wait for it to come up to a boil. And the one thing I love about my Pampered Chef saucepans is it has a clear top so I can see what is going on in here. And also it has removable handles. So they just slide right off like that. So this can go in the oven as well. Again, we're just going to wait for this to come up to a boil. Okay, so as you can see, it's come up to a boil now. So at this point, we want to go ahead and take the lid off, and we're going to let this boil for about 20 minutes. One thing you don't want to do is stir it. You may just want to swirl the pan every once in a while. And it'll take about 20 minutes, and then it's going to turn kind of an amber color. And at that point, we can go ahead and put it in our bowl so we're able to dip our puffs and start building our tower. All right, so as you can see, this has started to change colors. It's gotten a little bit darker, but we're looking for that amber color. So it's got just a couple more minutes to go. And once that gets finished, I'm going to go ahead and pour it in here, and we'll be ready to build our tower. Now, while I was waiting on my caramel, I went ahead and started on my base layer. And I did that by picking out all the larger cream puffs and placing them in a single layer on the bottom of my platter here. And you can make this as big or as small as you want. So I made some of these a little bit smaller. I made one a little bit bigger just so I can show you what you're going for. See how there's a hole in that cream puff? That is what you are looking for. So that's why I said don't open the oven door, because you might not be able to get that rise in there. So I've got my larger ones here. I've got some of the smaller ones there, some of the medium ones over here. And kind of what I'm trying to do is as it gets taller, the cream puffs kind of get smaller. So like I said, I've started, and all I'm doing is dipping these in the caramel. And I'll tell you what you might want to have on hand. It's just a bowl of cold water. If you've ever gotten burnt with candy, it's just a good idea to have a little bit of ice water on hand. I've just got some cold water there, but I would suggest putting a few ice cubes in there. So we're just going to start and dip each one of these in a little bit of caramel. And I'm just going to continue all the way around until I've gotten my base layer completed. Okay, so first layer done. Now we're going to move on to the second layer and each layer after that. And we're just going to keep moving them in until we have our tower finished. And I'm not sure if you can see, but see these little teeny tiny strands of sugar or caramel here. Once we get done building our tower, we're going to encase the whole thing in a bunch of those little strands. And it's going to be really, really pretty. And that's the fun part. It's almost like creme brulee, because you can take a knife and you get that nice crack whenever you bust into it. So, all right, let's finish our layers. My goodness, look how beautiful that is. So one thing you might want to do is kind of just take a really good look at it. Make sure it's kind of not leaning, like it looks like it might be leaning to the side a little bit. Your caramel should still be soft enough that you can kind of mold it just a little bit. And like I said, we've got all these nice little sugar strings here. So one of the things I did to make it a little bit easier is I took an old whisk and I took wire cutters and I just cut all the little whiskey pieces. If you don't have a whisk on hand, you can do this with a fork. It might just take a little bit longer. So I'm just taking this and we are just making little strands, little sugar strands. So this is just helping me get the job done faster. I'm going to try to get quite a bit on here. I'm probably slinging caramel all over in the floor, but that's okay. Look how pretty it is. It's worth it. like a spider web of candy. I think I got too much on there now. So my caramel's starting to get hard now, but I think we have enough on there. It's so pretty. I made a mess of my countertop, but oh my goodness, just look at that. I'm excited to photograph it. All right, well, there you have it. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Don't forget, like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Bye.